Hey folks, it's Nate. I want to talk a little bit about art and being avant garde. If you've never heard the term in reference to art before, it refers to basically being on the cutting edge of art, much like you can be on the cutting edge of technology. Of course, there are very big differences in the concepts. Like if you're not on the cutting edge of technology, you tend to wind up handicapped. While on the other hand, if you're not on the cutting edge of art, there's really nothing wrong with that. You're still capable of doing excellent art. Rembrandt's art is as excellent now as it was when he was alive. And it's not like it's lost any of its impact or its mastery over shadow, things like that. Whereas, of course, a 20, 30-year-old Tandy computer is not going to do nearly as well when you stack it up against modern computers. So there are, of course, differences to the comparison, but it means almost finding what is your culture's new area to explore with art. A great example of this in the indie comics community is Andrew Huerta. He has a very different style from most other traditional comic artists. I mean, if you look at the some of the infographics you see on Twitter where they show you all the indie comics that have come out recently, especially on Indiegogo, you'll see a lot of the art styles will all be very similar, with a couple of notable exceptions. One of them is, of course, Doug TenNapel, who has a very unique and distinctive style, probably coming from his background in animation. In fact, he's commented on that several times. And another is Andrew Huerta, who has a significant background in graffiti and wall murals and stuff like that. And it gives his style a very different, very fresh feeling. It's got, I think, a little more emphasis on shape, a lot more emphasis, I think, on color, and it's just very different, and it really pops out when you look at it. Now, one of the downsides of being avant-garde is that not everyone may like it. And to be totally honest, I'm not a huge fan of Huerta's art. It's a little bit too noisy, is one way to look at it. It's a little bit too cluttered for my tastes, but there are a lot of people out there who like it, and the people who like it really like it. And that is a big advantage for Andrew in the current market. There are a lot of independent comics out there right now. There always have been, of course, but there's more with the decline of the big two as quality storytellers. There's been I think, more enthusiasm to find the really good indie creators out there right now. And in that environment, as a creator, Andrew Huerta has a huge advantage. He's going to be able to build up an enthusiastic audience quickly. That's going to get him more word of mouth. He's going to get more exposure from those enthusiastic people. And he's going to be able to stand out from the crowd because there's nobody else drawing what he's drawing. That's a big deal for him. Another artist you can see this from is Narwhal. If you haven't seen his Earthbound Indiegogo, his artistic style is incredibly simple. It's driven almost entirely by gesture, and there's a lot of there's a sense of movement, of flow in his drawings that is kind of uncommon in most American comics, which tend to be a little on the stiff side, in my personal opinion. And again, the simplicity of his style makes it stand out. It makes it very, very noticeable. You're not going to confuse his art with anyone else's. Now, some might say that's because it's not as good. I would well, it's kind of true. He is very sketchy. He's very loose. A lot of the technical expertise that you see even in more simplistic artists like Doug TenNapel isn't there yet. But that's okay, in my opinion, because he has that sense of dynamism in his art. Full disclosure, I did back Earthbound, so I'm kind of, shilling for a product that I already enjoy. But at the same time, Narwhal didn't contact me and ask me for this or anything. I mean, why would he? Probably doesn't even watch this channel. My point is, again, he's very avant-garde in that he's breaking new ground. You don't have very gesture-driven, loose art like this in many American comics. Not everyone is going to like it, but those who do, like myself, are going to be very enthusiastic. I am really excited for Earthbound just because the art looks so dynamic. And while I am excited for Earthbound, I am even more excited to see what Narwhal is going to be doing in maybe 5 years when his art has matured and hopefully kept a lot of that fluidity, that gesture, that dynamism that makes it so exciting to look at, but has become more refined in its line work and more polished maybe in its use of color and things like that. So these are some great examples of avant-garde art in the American indie comic book scene. And I really think that kind of art translates into more sustainability, a stronger product, stronger brand recognition. If you look at Japanese manga, that is a comics industry that is very heavily avant-garde as compared to the culture around it. If you look at an artist like, or a manga like Berserk, the art there is very different from a lot of the rest of the industry around it. For that matter, so is the art of One Piece. It's a bit weird because One Piece is the #1 selling manga in Japan. So it's kind of hard to think of it as outside the mainstream, but artistically it's very, very different from the rest of what's published in Japan. And if you look at manga, it's an interesting comparison to the American comics market artistically, because the art style I feel in both American comics and Japanese manga has become very self-referential, very insular. It is no longer, an artist trying to express the basics of art as seen through the lens of their own personality, their own experience, their own enthusiasm, like you see with people like Narwhal or Huerta, and rather they are just preparing a product. And I know that especially for a lot of the Comicsgate creators, preparing a product is a big part of what they do. But if you let your art become too insular, too self-referential, it's just not as exciting. I know that for the big names, people like Ethan Van Sciver, like Mike S. Miller, these people who have really refined the craft, who can do it at the same level as people like Jim Lee or other artists who are still with the big two, they can probably compete. Their IP is not going to have the same recognition, but they have the artistic chops to play with the big boys. So, they can, pound for pound, their art is as good as the best art at DC or Marvel. But if you're a small time guy, being avant-garde is going to be a lot more advantageous to you. Non-traditional styles, maybe you just want to draw in black and white. That's what I plan to do. And that gives you much more contrast than even well-colored art can. Of course, it's sometimes more work to do. I don't know if that's true in my case. Just sort of slap down whatever. But my point is, if you can find that niche avant-garde style, you will stand out more and will give you a huge advantage. I would like to see more of that kind of really outside the box art in indie comics going forward. It's why I backed Bigfoot Bill. It's why I backed Earthbound. It's even why I backed Red Rooster. Mitch Breitweiser has worked in the industry, but his style is very Art Deco. It's not very much like traditional comics art in that respect, and it really excited me when I saw it. So, just some things to think about as you're doing your art. I hope you enjoyed thinking about it. I'm going to link both Earthbound and by Narwhal and Andrew Huerta's Sovereign in the description. So if you want to check out those Indiegogos, if by some chance you haven't seen them yet, that's where they'll be. And I will talk to you later.